I speak to a lot of new and aspiring game masters, and one of the most common things I get asked is how to get started on a project. The idea of creating a new class for your favorite system or creating an entirely new game from nothing can seem really daunting. So today I want to walk you through the process that I use pretty much every time I sit down to design a major project, and I call it the guiding star approach to design. This is going to help you stay focused, reduce scope creep, and produce stronger designs in the end. Greetings gamers, my name is Anto and I've been a professional writer and game designer for over a decade now. So if you want more content focused on the theory behind game design, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Now, in addition to running this channel and producing my own content, one of the things that I've done the most over the last decade is work with other companies as a consultant right at the start of projects to help them define the scope for their game and figure out some of the fundamental elements. And that's what we're going to cover today with our guiding star approach. What is guiding star design? Now, the idea behind the guiding star design approach is that at the beginning of a project, you set out your design parameters, your goal for your project, and this is your guiding star that you use throughout the rest of the writing process to help you keep you on course and help you make decisions that result in stronger game design. The guiding star can be as simple as a sentence, or it can be as complex as multiple pages of in-depth criteria. But by working with these ideas in mind, you're going to spend less time staring at the blank page and questioning every life choice that you've ever made that has led you to this point, and you're going to spend more time creating exciting designs. Now, I am an absolute fiend for scope creep. Give me like 5 unattended minutes and I'll have added 16 new parameters to a project and have ideas for years worth of content, only to get burnt out on the first task because I expended way too much of my creative energy daydreaming. So for me, a guiding star isn't just a useful tool, it's an absolute necessity. It keeps me focused and on task, and it helps me make sure I'm designing the project that I initially set out to. How to write your guiding star. Now, while your specific process might look different or change from project to project, here's a breakdown of how I write my guiding star. I establish the fantasy, I distill the fantasy into keywords, and then I test the design against those keywords. Establishing the fantasy. Now, I like to begin all of my projects by establishing the fantasy, which means what fantasy do I want this text to fulfill? If I'm designing a monster, that might be creating a specific mood within an encounter, or eliciting a certain kind of feeling from the players. If I'm designing a whole system, I'm thinking about what kind of fantasy I want the players of the system to be able to live out through the rule set. A game where the fantasy is playing as street level vigilantes protecting their neighborhood and improving the lives of the people in their community, one roundhouse kick at a time, is going to look and play very differently to a game where the fantasy is playing as an immortal warrior knight fighting aliens amongst the stars. When I began work on Project Cobalt, which is my in-progress sci-fi game, the fantasy I wanted to evoke was one of space operas, larger-than-life stories among the stars, where science and the physics of reality matter much less than the drama of the narrative. Distill the fantasy into keywords. Now, once you've got a sense of the fantasy that you want to evoke through your text, it's time to lock in your guiding star. As I said before, depending on your project, this can be as simple as a single sentence, or it can be as complicated as a page of rules that your system mechanics must and must not be. An approach that I have always found to be incredibly useful in establishing my guiding star is to try and distill it into a handful of keywords which can then be referenced against in all future design. For my in-progress sci-fi system, those keywords ended up being narrative, pulp, action, sci-fi. So narrative. I knew that I wanted Project Cobalt to be a narrative forward game, meaning the players would be describing their actions within the narrative first, and then they and the GM would work out together to determine the mechanical resolution for those actions depending on the circumstance. Games like Blades in the Dark, a lot of the Powered by the Apocalypse systems, and things like Vampire the Masquerade are examples of more narrative first games. Contrast that to games like D&D or Pathfinder 2nd Edition, where there is more often than not a predefined way to resolve an outcome by the mechanics, and the game assumes that that's the outcome you will follow. Pulp. This one is really important because it adds a lot of the context to the game. To me, pulp sci-fi stories are fast-paced, not overly concerned with the realism of how the science and physics of a situation work, and are focused on big, bombastic moments. I very intentionally want combat in my sci-fi game to move at a clip and be over very quickly. I want the players to be capable of getting through half a dozen combats in a night's play with no problem. And this guiding star informs so much of the rest of the design of the system, from the action economy to the amount of damage that weapons do to enemy health. It's all designed with fast-paced pulp combat in mind. Action. This means my primary focus is always on options that help the game and the players feel like they're playing out an 80s action movie in space. I want exciting mechanical options, big set piece events, and I focus on combat. If I one day decide to mess around with a botany system, I have to ask myself, does this serve the action? Does it meet our other guiding star criteria? That doesn't mean that the game can only be about action, or that the only stories that you can tell using the system will be ones of violence, but it does mean that combat will be one of the core pillars of the game and needs to be exciting, fun, and well supported. Sci-fi. The easiest keyword to measure against is sci-fi. When I'm thinking of a new idea, I ask myself, is this sci-fi? If the answer is yes, then we're good. If the answer is no, things get a bit more complicated. Evolving your guiding star. Your guiding star is a tool to help you and not a set of chains to keep you locked into one direction. You can and sometimes should go against your guiding star for the sake of a more interesting game. For example, a question I came up fairly early on in development of Project Cobalt is there magic in this setting? And so I did what I always do. I checked against my guiding star, but I ran into a problem because I don't think magic is inherently sci-fi. To me, it's much more a hallmark of fantasy, which means if we include magic in our space game, do we risk shifting the genre away from what we want? Now, there's no empirically right or wrong answer here. It's down to you as an individual designer. But for me, I decided I wanted the core experience of my sci-fi game to feel more classically sci-fi than space fantasy. Now, that's not to say I don't have plenty of ideas for how and why there might be magic in the world of Project Cobalt, because I get lots of ideas. See above about the warning on scope creep. So while you can deviate from your guiding star and it can lead to awesome results, always keeping it in mind is going to make sure you're prioritizing design decisions that fit the core themes of the game the best. Using the guiding star in homebrew. Now, the guiding star principle isn't just for completely new design work. It can be an invaluable tool for homebrew creation as well. When I begin working on a new 5e monster, for example, I'll always start the process by establishing the fantasy I'm looking to express through the monster's rules and mechanics. Perhaps I'm looking for a shape-changing predator that can fit into the cultural superstitions of skinwalkers that the people in my game world might have. From there, I'll choose 2 of 3 monster pillars: fast, strong, or tough. In this case, I would choose fast and strong. So with that information, I'm able to make a number of choices very quickly when it comes to the design of a monster. A fast, strong shape changer that has deep connections to superstition makes it really easy to make some of the mechanical choices for the monster design, such as giving the monster access to some kind of shape changer ability. But then when we consider the cultural superstition, having the monster be able to mimic creatures suddenly adds a different, more sinister dimension to the monster's lore. You can see this entire process in action in real time in a members only video I released last year, and channel members also get access to a whole bunch of exclusive stuff like design videos going over my sci-fi game, campaign diaries, storytime videos, and a whole bunch more. So check the link in the description if you're interested in that. The next time you sit down to design a monster or a whole system, give the guiding star approach a try. What fantasy are you chasing? What keywords define it? And you'll be amazed at how much easier the rest of the design process becomes. I'd love to hear how this approach has changed the way you design down in the comments below. And if you want to keep watching, check out this video where I talk about how I make TTRPG books using Affinity Publisher. But until next time, happy gaming.